Thanks, first of all, for joining. I think we have been trying to really think about ways to highlight really good work that's taking place in a local community in and around the COVID conversation, around, all these changes that are happening in our community. And we know that as an organization, you guys continue to be thought leaders, not only in the work that you do, but in the way that you do it. So what I wanted to do is just give you a space to have that dialogue back and forth, talk about what's going on, ways you're thinking about some big picture efforts in your organization, and really do a chance to do some storytelling around kind of what you guys are thinking about. So with that, just for the sake of introduction, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about Tailwind for people that maybe not as familiar as the rest of us about the cool work that you guys do.
Sure. So I am Danny Maloney, and I'm CEO and one of the two co-founders here at Tailwind. I've been in OKC for about 8 years now. So a transplant, not a native, moved here from New York most immediately, but grew up mostly on the East Coast, worked out in Silicon Valley for a while. But my background's all in the tech industry. So before Tailwind, I was at Google, YouTube, AOL for a number of years and got to work on some really fun projects there. But then ultimately moved here for personal reasons. So in terms of Tailwind, we are a marketing technology platform, and we really focus on helping small businesses with digital marketing efforts. The two primary marketing channels we support today are Instagram and Pinterest. But longer term, our view is we want to be able to help our customers with all of their digital marketing needs through our software. So we're continuing to expand and add new products to the suite over time.
So tell us a little bit about your teams, because I know you've got people here in Oklahoma City and you have people in other places. Tell us about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So, in this day and age, it actually seems almost irrelevant, but because
exactly.
we're all working from home. But yeah, so pre-COVID, we had about 20% of our team or so working out of our New York office, the majority of the rest working out of our OKC office, and then a handful of folks who were already working remotely from different parts of the country. And today we're all still working remotely. So I happen to be in the office at the moment for just a quiet space. But officially our office is still closed. Everyone's working from home. And we're probably going to continue in that mode for quite some time.
So I'm going to break up our line of questions into kind of two buckets. One is I want to talk about things you're talking about internally, because we engage with other members of your staff and heard a lot about how you're thinking about taking care of your own team in these moments. But also you guys have also done some work from a platform standpoint to engage other businesses and provide some support. So let me focus on the employee and the team side for a minute. So we talked to Elena, your chief of staff, and she has told us a lot about ways you talked about COVID with your employees and the ways you thought about people's needs. Can you talk about that just for a minute or two?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I was watching the COVID situation pretty early on, even while it was still only in China, because of what seemed like a pretty high risk that it would eventually spread globally. And now, hindsight is 2020, but at that point, it wasn't necessarily obvious if that would happen or not. So we were watching it. I was also just doing some personal travel at that time. So that led probably to me paying a bit more attention. But as it became clear that COVID was spreading to other countries and almost certainly would make its way to the US, we started thinking through what our plan was going to be and following what some other companies were doing in larger cities, especially on the coast, that were more likely to be impacted first, like San Francisco and New York. So as that started, we were pretty proactive about it. We started out with thinking through what our health procedures in the office would be, if we could continue to operate the office. We began just talking to the team, raising awareness about COVID if they weren't aware already, and sharing some of the research with them so they would understand what was going on before it became an emergency. And honestly, once it took hold in the US, things just progressed really rapidly. So in the span of probably about 2 weeks, we went from preparation mode to, we need to figure out our plan to offices shut down. And we shut down our offices, I forget the exact timeline, but I think pretty far in advance of the official shutdown in Oklahoma City. And that was really just, at that point, it seemed obvious we were going to get COVID here and it was going to spread. So we wanted people to be safe and healthy. So we closed down the offices. We gave folks a cash stipend so they could stock up on whatever supplies and food and so forth they needed to be able to work from home. We've been finding ways to get people the equipment they need at home to have good office setups and all of that. But that honestly, it feels like a lifetime ago at this point.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't even. February was like 6 years ago at this point.
I'm pretty sure at least that. Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to, I think I want to commend you guys because I know we hear a lot, Elena and other team members are engaged with us, like in our talent council and some other thought leadership conversations. And I just want to commend you for the ways that you guys have thought about taking care of your employees and your team and knowing that, I've heard Elena say this, taking care of team and families is first and then trying to figure out, how to do other stuff around it kind of comes second. And I appreciate that you guys are thinking about that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of that just comes from an underlying philosophy that, we're all people first, right? Like I don't even like using the word employee, honestly. I hate that word.
Yeah, sure. Good.
But, we're people first when we're team members second. And if we're not happy and healthy and centered at home and all of that, we're not going to come in and do good work for our customers every day. So I think ultimately the two sides have to be and are fundamentally connected. There is no such thing as work and life being fully divided in my mind.
Yeah.
And so we want to remove the negative impacts that work can have on life in order to help, both ultimately be more positive.
Well, can you tell us more about the work that you're doing on the business side? Because, we've heard a little bit about your grant initiative and wanted to highlight that work as well. So maybe tell us about how that conversation started and what you're doing and maybe where you see that going.
Sure. So as I mentioned up top, we serve primarily small businesses.
Yeah.
And so as COVID, again, was starting to spread, honestly, we didn't know how we were going to be impacted, but our working assumption was that the businesses that we support would be impacted pretty substantially.
Sure.
And so we started putting feelers out early and just having conversations with our customers. So it was sending out messages and surveys in app, but then following up with a lot of them one-on-one to get a sense of how their particular business was or wasn't being impacted early. And
Sure.
we saw the signs pretty quickly that certain types of customers were being impacted pretty heavily while others actually weren't, or even were seeing growth.
Sure.
And so as we had those conversations, there were really three needs that surfaced, right? The first was sort of the emergency resource mode. Just how do I even stay on top of all the news, all the options for me? And so we put together a resource hub of government programs and work from home resources and things like that
Cool.
folks could use to make the adjustment. The second step was thinking beyond the initial emergency mode. How do we help folks live, or their businesses live through the recession that we knew was going to come,
Right.
and then ultimately come out stronger on the other side? So we put together an educational series called Survive and Thrive, where we did weekly webinars
Cool.
tackling specific topics related to that. And that ran for, I think, about 7 or 8 weeks before we felt like it kind of ran its course and people got the information they needed. And then
sure.
The third piece was financial support. So we created a $1 million grant program where we actually gave away free grants of Tailwind software.
Wow.
So that way our customers wouldn't have to pay for the software during this time if their business was significantly impacted by COVID.
Awesome.
So yeah, that was pretty well received. We ended up issuing over 10,000 grants through the program. Yeah, it was a pretty substantial number. And as part of it, we enabled grant recipients to nominate up to 3 other businesses if they wanted to, that they knew were impacted by COVID. So that way they could also benefit their communities. So that was pretty cool too, because a lot of folks we talked to, obviously they were concerned about their own businesses, but there was also this sense of helplessness, right? Where it was like, I want to help my friends and family and the coffee shop down the street that I love, whatever it might be. But I just don't feel I have the means to right now. So we saw that as kind of a pay it forward piece of the program that they could do also.
That's fantastic. To your point, I think we know that the smallest businesses are the ones that are most fragile in these moments. And also to your point about not knowing how we as communities can pitch in when it's not as easy as, a food drive or, all these other things we traditionally do in disasters. So thank you for being a leader in that space.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, honestly, we were just doing what we thought was right as a team. So, but thank you for that. The small businesses definitely are most fragile. I think one of the other challenges we saw is that in times of crisis, it's really easy to just freeze up and stop doing everything. And so in terms of longer term success, we thought that one of the biggest risks to businesses was going to be that they stop talking to their community, they stop engaging their customers, they stop marketing. And I think what we're seeing now as places like Oklahoma begin to reopen is that the businesses that stayed engaged with their customers somehow, even if they stopped operations temporarily, are having a much easier time opening up because they are more top of mind. And if anything, they may have deepened their relationship with customers during this time because it created sort of more of a personal bond if they did that communication well. So we really wanted to encourage people to not give up. Like, don't just stop everything. And I think the program helped a lot of folks to do that.
That's fantastic. Well, we've got just a quick one more minute, but
sure.
I know that, you're talking about community integration. There's other conversations I think you guys are starting to lead in. Do you want to talk anything about other things that your guys are working on as it relates to other community work, and kind of where's Tailwind headed in some of those conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the big one on all of our minds right now is anti-racism and the BLM movement that's sweeping across the country. And, honestly, last week was a pretty tough week for us as a team where, we as a team just have never really created an anti-racism platform before. So we didn't necessarily have the answers. But I think through a lot of self-reflection over the course of the week, we just decided we should be doing a lot more here than we are. And it's the right thing to do for the world, and we want to do that. So sort of similar, but a different context for sure. And so, I think now what's most important is we've made a commitment as a team to greater diversity and inclusion. We're working through ways that we can get more involved. So, for example, promoting access and opportunity to Black and people of color, children and teenagers to get into the tech field, which has been a big problem over time. And ultimately, economic inequality is a big piece of this puzzle. We're trying to be very, proactive going forward, at least, even if historically we feel like we didn't do enough. But that's been a big focus for us over the last week or two, and it's something that we're going to continue dedicating time and energy to.
Well, I think we've talked about this internally too a little bit. Is we know this isn't a moment in time. This is a long-term discussion about pivots we need to make culturally, and in the addressing this in the business community as well as thinking about it looks a lot of personal self-reflection and also thinking about what does action look like coming out of this. So. I've watched a lot of your social and LinkedIn posts that some of your staff have done, and I commend you guys for leaning into the conversation. So a lot of great work, and I just am excited about all the things you guys are doing in the community, and I want to thank you for your investment here as well.
Thank you, for sure. And honestly, again, it's really the team that's driving that leaning in. So it's a broad effort. And one of the things I was really encouraged by was that, everyone on the team seemed very clear that we should lean in somehow. And it was much more of a challenge of how do we do it and what's the right way to do it. But what you said is really critical. It's taking action, right? So it's how do we actually help catalyze positive change in the world? Right. And make it a better place.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, again, just thank you for everything you guys are doing. Commend your team, and thank you for your investment in Oklahoma City, and continue to be thought leaders in many spaces.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Danny. Appreciate you. Cheers.
Bye.